The American Yawp. Chapter 8, The Early Republic. Section 1, Introduction. Thomas Jefferson's electoral victory over John Adams, and the larger victory of the Democratic Republicans over the Federalists, was but one of many changes in the early republic. Some, like Jefferson's victory, were accomplished peacefully, and others violently. The wealthy and the powerful, middling, and poor whites, Native Americans, free and enslaved African Americans, influential and poor women, all demanded a voice in the new nation that Thomas Paine called an asylum for liberty. All would, in their own way, lay claim to the freedom and equality promised, if not fully realized, by the Revolution. Section 2, Free and Enslaved Black Americans and the Challenge to Slavery. Led by the enslaved man Gabriel, close to 1,000 enslaved men planned to end slavery in Virginia by attacking Richmond in late August 1800. Some of the conspirators would set diversionary fires in the city's warehouse district. Others would attack Richmond's white residents, seize weapons, and capture Virginia Governor James Monroe. On August 30th, 2 enslaved men revealed the plot to their enslaver, who notified authorities. Faced with bad weather, Gabriel and other leaders postponed the attack until the next night, giving Governor Monroe and the militia time to capture the conspirators. After briefly escaping, Gabriel was seized, tried, and hanged along with 25 others. Their executions sent the message that others would be punished if they challenged slavery. Subsequently, the Virginia government increased restrictions on free people of color. Gabriel's rebellion, as the plot came to be known, taught Virginia's white residents several lessons. First, it suggested that enslaved black Virginians were capable of preparing and carrying out a sophisticated and violent revolution, undermining white supremacist assumptions about the inherent intellectual inferiority of black people. Furthermore, it demonstrated that white efforts to suppress news of other slave revolts, especially the 1791 slave rebellion in Haiti, had failed. Not only did some literate enslaved people read accounts of the successful attack in Virginia's newspapers, but others also heard about the rebellion firsthand when slaveholding refugees from Haiti arrived in Virginia with their enslaved laborers after July 1793. The Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1804, inspired free and enslaved black Americans and terrified white Americans. Port cities in the United States were flooded with news and refugees. Free people of color embraced the revolution, understanding it as a call for full abolition and the rights of citizenship denied in the United States. Over the next several decades, black Americans continually looked to Haiti as an inspiration in their struggle for freedom. For example, in 1829, David Walker, a black abolitionist in Boston, wrote an appeal that called for resistance to slavery and racism. Walker called Haiti the glory of the blacks and terror of the tyrants, and said that Haitians, according to their word, are bound to protect and comfort us. Haiti also proved that, given equal opportunities, people of color could achieve as much as white people. In 1826, the third college graduate of color in the United States, John Russwurm, gave a commencement address at Bowdoin College, noting that Haitians have adopted the Republican form of government, and in no country are the rights and privileges of citizens and foreigners more respected, and crimes less frequent. In 1838, the Colored American, an early black newspaper, professed that no one who reads with an unprejudiced mind the history of Haiti can doubt the capacity of colored men, nor the propriety of removing all their disabilities. Haiti, and the activism it inspired, sent the message that enslaved and free black people could not be omitted from conversations about the meaning of liberty and equality. Their words and actions, on plantations, streets, and the printed page, left an indelible mark on early national political culture. The black activism inspired by Haiti's revolution was so powerful that anxious white leaders scrambled to use the violence of the Haitian revolt to reinforce white supremacy and pro-slavery views by limiting the social and political lives of people of color. White publications mocked black Americans as buffoons, ridiculing calls for abolition and equal rights. The most famous of these, the Bobolition broadsides, published in Boston in the 1810s, crudely caricatured African Americans. Widely distributed materials like these became the basis for racist ideas that thrived in the 19th century. But such ridicule also implied that black Americans' presence in the political conversation was significant enough to require it. The need to reinforce such an obvious difference between whiteness and blackness implied that those differences might not be so obvious after all. Henry Moss, an enslaved man in Virginia, became arguably the most famous black man of the day when white spots appeared on his body in 1792, turning him visibly white within 3 years. As his skin changed, Moss marketed himself as a great curiosity in Philadelphia and soon earned enough money to buy his freedom. He met the great scientists of the era, including Samuel Stanhope Smith and Dr. Benjamin Rush, who joyously deemed moss to be living proof of their theory that the black color, as it is called, of the Negroes is derived from the leprosy. Something somehow was curing Moss of his blackness. In the whitening body of slave-turned-patriot-turned-curiosity, many Americans fostered ideas of race that would cause major problems in the years ahead. The first decades of the new American Republic coincided with a radical shift in understandings of race. Politically and culturally, Enlightenment thinking fostered beliefs in common humanity, the possibility of societal progress, the remaking of oneself, and the importance of one's social and ecological environment. A four-pronged revolt against the hierarchies of the old world. Yet a tension arose due to Enlightenment thinkers' desire to classify and order the natural world. Carolus Linnaeus, Comte de Buffon, Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, and others created connections between race and place as they divided the racial types of the world, according to skin color, cranial measurements, and hair. They claimed that years under the hot sun and tropical climate of Africa darkened the skin and reconfigured the skulls of the African race, whereas the cold northern latitudes of Europe molded and sustained the Caucasian race. The environments endowed both races with respective characteristics, which accounted for differences in humankind tracing back to a common ancestry. A universal human nature, therefore, housed not fundamental differences, but rather the civilized and the primitive, two poles on a scale of social progress. Informed by European anthropology and Republican optimism, Americans confronted their own uniquely problematic racial landscape. In 1787, Samuel Stanhope Smith published his treatise essay on the causes of the variety of complexion and figure in the human species, which further articulated the theory of racial change and suggested that improving the social environment would tap into the innate equality of humankind and dramatically uplift non-white races. The proper society, he and others believed, could gradually whiten men the way nature spontaneously chose to whiten Henry Moss. Thomas Jefferson disagreed. While Jefferson thought Native Americans could improve and become civilized, he declared in his Notes on the State of Virginia, 1784, that black people were incapable of mental improvement and that they might even have a separate ancestry, a theory known as polygenesis, or multiple creations. His belief in polygenesis was less to justify slavery. Enslavers universally rejected the theory as anti-biblical and thus a threat to their primary instrument of justification, the Bible, and more to justify schemes for a white America, such as the plan to gradually send freed black people to Africa. Many Americans believed nature had made the white and black races too different to peacefully coexist, and they viewed African colonization as the solution to America's racial problem. Jefferson's Notes on the State of Virginia sparked considerable backlash from anti-slavery and black communities. The celebrated black surveyor Benjamin Banneker, for example, immediately wrote to Jefferson and demanded he, quote, eradicate that train of absurd and false ideas, and instead embrace the belief that we are all of one flesh, and with all the same sensations and endowed with the same faculties. Many years later, in his appeal to the colored citizens of the world, 1829, David Walker channeled decades of black protest, simultaneously denouncing the moral rot of slavery and racism while praising the inner strength of the race. Jefferson had his defenders. White men such as Charles Caldwell and Samuel George Morton hardened Jefferson's skepticism, offering a biological case for black and white people not only having separate creations, but actually being different species, a position increasingly articulated throughout the antebellum period. Few Americans subscribed wholesale to such theories, but many shared beliefs in white supremacy. As the decades passed, white Americans were forced to acknowledge that if the black population was indeed whitening, it resulted from sexual violence and not the environment. The sense of inspiration and wonder that followed Henry Moss in the 1790s would have been impossible just a generation later. Section 3, Jeffersonian Republicanism, free and enslaved black Americans were not alone in pushing against political hierarchies. Jefferson's election to the presidency in 1800 represented a victory for non-elite white Americans in their bid to assume more direct control over the government. Elites had made no secret of their hostility toward the direct control of government by the people. In both private correspondence and published works, many of the nation's founders argued that pure democracy would lead to anarchy. Massachusetts Federalist Fisher Ames spoke for many of his colleagues when he lamented the dangers that democracy posed because it depended on public opinion, which, quote, shifts with every current of caprice. Jefferson's election, for Federalists like Ames, heralded a slide down into the mire of a democracy. The election of 1800 initially resulted in a tie vote in the Electoral College between two Republicans, Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. Each candidate had secured 73 Electoral College votes, meaning that the House of Representatives would have to choose the winner, with each state getting one vote. It took 36 separate ballots for Jefferson to eventually emerge victorious, and even then, that victory only occurred when a Federalist from Delaware, James Ashton Bayard, eventually decided to avert further constitutional calamity and put Jefferson over the top. Bayard himself justified his decision to finally vote for Jefferson as a, quote, sacred duty, a decision not to hazard the Constitution upon which the political existence of the state depends. John Adams, meanwhile, had claimed only 65 Electoral College votes. For many Northern Federalists, the real constitutional crisis was not the deadlocked vote between Jefferson and Burr in the House, but Adams's loss. The Republican Party, strongest in the South, had gained additional votes in the Electoral College due to the 3/5 clause. It was those additional slave votes, Federalists charged, that had given the Republican candidates an unfair advantage over Adams. The election, Federalists charged, had been stolen. In their fury and frustration at Adams's loss, Federalists took direct aim at the Constitution's 3/5 clause, but their claim did not primarily attack the injustice of denying liberty or rights to human beings deserving of both. Instead, Federalists claimed the Constitution's fundamental injustice lay in the fact that it included any fraction of enslaved people in the apportionment tally. The Constitution represented slaves who were not free men, and thus were no better entitled to representation than cattle and horses, as one newspaper piece put it. Federalists would continue to attack Jefferson's presidency for years following his initial victory, and their assaults on the 3/5 clause would continue this basic line of argument. The Constitution, they chorused, was fundamentally tainted by the 3/5 clause, but the corruption, they claimed, lay chiefly in the fact that it counted enslaved people as persons at all. In taking this argument, Federalists were attempting to attack the claim that Jefferson's election amounted to a mandate from the people to act on their behalf. Indeed, many political leaders and non-elite citizens believed Jefferson embraced the politics of the masses. In a government like ours, it is the duty of the chief magistrate to unite in himself the confidence of the whole people, Jefferson wrote in 1810. 9 years later, looking back on his monumental election, Jefferson again linked his triumph to the political engagement of ordinary citizens. The Revolution of 1800 was as real a revolution in the principles of our government as that of 76 was in its form, he wrote. Not affected indeed by the sword, but by the rational and peaceable instrument of reform, the suffrage, voting of the people. Jefferson desired to convince Americans and the world that a government that answered directly to the people would lead to lasting national union, not anarchic division. He wanted to prove that free people could govern themselves democratically. Jefferson set out to differentiate his administration from the Federalists. He defined American union by the voluntary bonds of fellow citizens toward one another and toward the government. In contrast, the Federalists supposedly imagined a union defined by expansive state power and public submission to the rule of aristocratic elites. For Jefferson, the American nation drew its energy and its strength from the confidence of a reasonable and rational people. Democratic Republican celebrations often credited Jefferson with saving the nation's Republican principles. In a move that enraged Federalists, they used the image of George Washington, who had passed away in 1799, linking the Republican virtue that Washington epitomized to the democratic liberty that Jefferson championed. Leaving behind the military pomp of power-obsessed Federalists, Democratic Republicans had peacefully elected the scribe of national independence, the philosopher-patriot who had battled tyranny with his pen, not with a sword or a gun. The celebrations of Jefferson's presidency and the defeat of the Federalists expressed many citizens' willingness to assert greater direct control over the government as citizens. The definition of citizenship was changing. Early American national identity was coded masculine, just as it was coded white and wealthy, yet since the Revolution, women had repeatedly called for a place in the conversation. Mercy Otis Warren was one of the most noteworthy female contributors to the public ratification debate over the Constitution of 1787 and 1788, but women all over the country were urged to participate in the discussion over the Constitution. It is the duty of the American ladies, in a particular manner, to interest themselves in the success of the measures that are now pursuing by the Federal Convention for the Happiness of America, a Philadelphia essayist announced. They can retain their rank as rational beings only in a free government. In a monarchy, they will be considered as valuable members of a society, only in proportion as they are capable of being mothers for soldiers, who are the pillars of crowned heads. American women were more than mothers to soldiers. They were mothers to liberty. Historians have used the term Republican motherhood to describe the early American belief that women were essential in nurturing the principles of liberty in the citizenry. Women would pass along important values of independence and virtue to their children, ensuring that each generation cherished the same values of the American Revolution. Because of these ideas, women's actions became politicized. Some even described women's choice of sexual partner as crucial to the health and well-being of both the party and the nation. The fair daughters of America should never disgrace themselves by giving their hands in marriage to any but real Republicans, a group of New Jersey Democratic Republicans asserted. A Philadelphia paper toasted, "The fair daughters of Columbia." May their smiles be the reward of Republicans only. Though unmistakably steeped in the gendered assumptions about female sexuality and domesticity that denied women an equal share of the political rights men enjoyed. These statements also conceded the pivotal role women played as active participants in partisan politics.